Joe said, my name's Sally Percival and I chair the Think Local Act Personal Partnership and the National Co-Production Advisory Group. But more importantly, I am mum to Victoria, who has a long-term health condition, to Alexander, who has autism and a learning disability. This is my partner, Alan, and his daughter, Hannah, who lives with us, has a profound learning disability. And my mum, Audrey, who was diagnosed with dementia in 2010. Now, I want you to be kind to me today. This is the first time I've shared this story about my mum's dementia, so please bear with me. So, today I'm going to share our story of dementia and what really helped my mum, what helped me, and what helped our family. I guess our dementia journey really started the day I went to visit my mum, and I walked into the kitchen and she was holding what she thought was her mobile phone. She said to me, "Sally, I've been trying to ring you all day. You haven't answered your phone. I think there's something wrong with my mobile." She handed it to me and I said, "Mum, that's the television remote control." Now, she said, "Why didn't I know that?" We giggled afterwards, but I realised that was the first inkling I should have had that maybe something was amiss. Now, my mum was always a night owl. And as children, we would often get up and the hallway would be redecorated or the lounge would be rearranged. And one day in the middle of the night, my mum decided to rearrange her bedroom. She fell over and broke her leg. Unfortunately, this break went undiagnosed for a year. And by the time she was diagnosed with a broken leg, the damage to mum's leg was irreversible, and she had lost the ability to walk. Her dementia had really started to show itself, and she'd been in hospital for a whole year. So the decision was taken by professionals, without consulting with us, to put her into a care home. Now, I am not opposed to all care homes, but the one that my mother was put in was particularly bad. And it was a terrible experience for my mum and for me. She lost the will to live, and she became a shadow of her former self. She was being eaten away with bed sores, dementia, and depression. Then one day I went into her room, having gone to visit her. She was lying flat on her back, having been put to bed at 3:30, and she was choking on her own vomit. Her call button had been hidden at the back of a drawer, and I'm sure without my intervention, she would have died. It was at that time that I decided I could stand it no longer, and I decided I was going to kidnap my own mother. And I did. We called it the Great Escape. I got her in my car and I drove her home, much to the upset of adult social care, who often asked my motives of why I had brought her home. My motive was simple. I wanted my mum alive and I wanted her happy. At first, the district nurses, who had to come out every day, were a bit suspicious of me. However, very quickly they began to see my mum shine and heal, and they really helped me to secure a personal budget for my mum. The first social worker I met for my mum was actually really angry when I asked for a personal budget. She said, "How on earth do you know about them?" And I said that my son had autism and a learning disability, and a personal budget worked really well for him. She said, "They may be all right for somebody with a learning disability, but they will not work for older people." However, I did get a social care budget, and without doubt, that personalised budget saved my mum's life. I then began to putting together a team of excellent carers, and we called them Audrey's Angels. It was hard work, but it was worth it. With the excellent care from my Audrey's Angels, within 2 months, her inner self was healing nicely. The The bed sores were being treated, and I no longer had that terrible guilt every time I left her. However, as her dementia was getting worse, I started to realise that our relationship was changing. And I was no longer just daughter, I was becoming mother and daughter. And that was a really strange feeling, to become mother to my own mother. However, luckily my mum retained the use of her arms and her hands. Now, my mum's favourite thing was to have a cigarette and have a glass of wine. So luckily, that really gave her something to look forward to. And using those arms and hands came in very handy. Her dementia continued to take over her sharp mind. However, her spirit shone through at all times, and she dealt with this horrible disease with elegance, humour and courage that she had displayed all of her life. Although I was really surprised when my mother, who I have to say was rather prudish and I had never heard her swear, told the visiting doctor that she had an absolutely hilarious joke for him. The joke made no sense at all, but she had remembered the punchline full on. And the punchline was, only if they've got the fucking bricks. So that was my next thing I had to learn, not to be embarrassed by anything my mum said or did. And she told that joke in various forms to everyone that came to visit. Now, I knew my mum really well. After all, I'd known her for 50 years. I had power of attorney for her, so I was able to make decisions for her and with her, which was so important. However, it is a really serious responsibility, and it was vital that I made accurate choices. I admit I made assumptions based on the fact that I thought I knew her so well. I attended a workshop with Helen Sanderson, and she talked well about her Living Well booklet. It's a guide to help you think about and record what is important to you now and in the future. It's about planning for the end of your life. I didn't think it would help me learn more about my mum, but I thought it would help me capture exactly what she needed and wanted to happen now and in the future. Then I could share it with the rest of our family. I'd now like to play a news clip, if we've got sound.
And welcome back. Dementia has become the biggest single killer in England and Wales, overtaking cancers and heart disease for the first time. Official figures show that of the 530,000 deaths last year, more than 61,000 were due to age-related diseases like Alzheimer's.
Yes, it's thought better lifestyles and treatment are behind the shift, but there are also concerns it could have huge implications for social care. Sally Percival, who looks after her mother Audrey, told Damon Green about living with dementia.
Do you want some more hand cream?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Audrey suffered from dementia for 6 years. She's almost deaf now and confined to her bed, and her family knows she hasn't long left. But she's at home in her house in Cumbria, surrounded by the people who love her, and still does the things she enjoys the most.
My mum is still very much present. You know, she still beams when you walk in. There are some days when she doesn't recognise me, but she's still happy to see people. And she's always happy to have a glass of champagne.
Audrey's had a long and happy life, a clever and funny and energetic young woman, a head teacher who loved the outdoors, loved her life in the Lake District when she retired. But when she was diagnosed in 2010, she made sure she set out in writing exactly how she wanted to meet her end. The living will she wrote with her daughter's help means the family can be certain what she wants in her last days.
That's been the most important thing, not only for my mum, but for us as a family to know clearly when we're in a bit of an emotional state, because our mum's dying, we're very clear, we can refer to this living will and know that we're doing the right thing by my mother.
If more of us are to die from dementia than from any other cause, all the more reason, say Audrey's family, to enjoy the time we have.
Without doubt, I've really enjoyed this time with my mum.
My kids are lovely.
They are lovely. I sit with her and I talk with her, and I make sure that everything's all right in her world.
And when her time comes, as doctors say it could any day, she will have lived every day on her own terms. Damon Green, ITV News in Cumbria.
Well, her death didn't come anytime soon. In fact, she lived for another 3 years, and I cannot emphasise the importance of capturing Mum's living wishes. As I said in the film, I was a little bit frightened about approaching some of the questions in the Living Well booklet. Things like the end of life and funeral planning. But I suppressed my fears and carried on. I made us a coffee and we started talking about her life, capturing her important memories in the booklet. We really enjoyed it, and I was surprised at some of the funny stories and magical moments that Mum shared with me that I had never heard before. Mum's recent memory may be fading, but her longer-term memory was still bright. The next time I visited, Mum asked, "Can we do that booklet again?" So we continued looking at the relationship circle. This sparked new and different stories about people Mum had known and loved. I found the section about what's important to me now and how best to support me invaluable. Mum had a variety of PAs, in fact she had 15, and she had very clear ideas about how she wanted to live her life. And it made it so much easier for her PAs to read in a concise way all about what Mum truly wanted and how they could support her. It was very reassuring when we got to the working and not working section, as there was very little on the not working side. It was apparent that Mum was happy with her life. When we discussed the serious subject of hope and fears, it was very clear her absolute terror and fear was to be forced back into a care home. This information proved invaluable. Later, when Mum had a continuing healthcare assessment, I was told that without doubt my mum would be happier and healthier in a care home. I was adamant that Mum would hate it, but they were firm that Mum couldn't possibly know what was good for her. I showed the panel the booklet that clearly proved what she feared the most was going into a care home. Consequently, she remained at home, but with the addition of night cover funded by a personal health budget, which meant Mum had really good quality care both day and night. And that made a huge difference to her failing health and meant that I could then spend nights at home. We then started planning for the end of her life. It was me that found it difficult. But she was keen to carry on, and I am so glad we did. This section threw up the most astounding information. As I said earlier, I knew my mum so well, but that had made me lead to inaccurate assumptions that if we hadn't have discussed, I would have got so wrong. There was no doubt I found talking about my mother's potential death very upsetting, and that didn't change. But through our discussions, I discovered that not only would I have missed inviting key people to the funeral, I would have actually buried her in the wrong place. And that's a pretty serious mistake to make. When we had finished the booklet, I realised how important it was, because I knew Mum's dementia would only get worse, and this booklet contained lots of her living wishes, so that when she can no longer express her needs and wants, we had them recorded clearly in black and white as a reminder of what Mum really wanted to happen. I didn't want to think about her death, but at least I knew I would get it as right as possible, and she would live out the rest of her life the way she wanted it. And when she was gone, we had a clear plan of what she wanted for herself. We also had a wonderful book of memories. The process of completing this booklet with Mum also gave us time together. It made me sit down and spend time with Mum talking and laughing, which sometimes I forgot to do within my role as carer. And for that I'm grateful. When the dreadful time did come and Mum became very poorly, she couldn't eat and drink, and I knew that it was time. My mum had been very clear that she didn't want to suffer, and so upon reading her absolute rational wishes, it was agreed by the doctor that we would allow her to get her final wish. So her carers and I had a bottle of champagne, sat around her bed playing cards, which was her very favourite thing to do. and I hope the sound of us all playing cards gave her comfort. Mum died in her own home, in her own bed, surrounded by people who loved her, with champagne on her lips, just the way she wanted. Her battle was over, and my years of worry, tears, and constant attachment to my mobile phone, expecting calls from her PAs at any time, were over. No more dementia, no more pain, no more suffering. Dementia creates such a bizarre and unfair grieving process for families. I feel like I lost my mum quite a long time before she died, but there was no funeral and no grave to visit. But that meant that when she did die, I had almost come to terms with it, and I actually really enjoyed her funeral because we did it just the way she wanted it and just the way she planned. So although she may be gone, in so many ways she lives on with us. When my mum was dying, she said she didn't want us to grieve, she wanted us to smile. So I'd like to just leave you with this poem in honour of my mum. Should I die and leave you here? Should I die and leave you here a while? Be not like others sore undone, who keep long vigils by silent dust and weep. For my sake, turn again to life and smile, nerving thy heart and trembling hand to do something to comfort weaker hearts than thine. Thank you.